I think what's bad, it's what everyone highlights, is that it's a new tech. People don't really know how to use it. They can start sharing wrong data with it. They can over rely on it. But it happens all the time. I mean, when machine translation was just introduced, I think one big oil company at some point found all their proprietary data on Google search, just because they didn't know that they cannot really paste their confidential information in this free online translator. Much like here, it will take some time.
Lexigo presents The Native Experience with your host, Brian.
Oh, yeah. Hello, world. This is Brian from Lexigo.com, and you're listening to the Native Experience Podcast, the show that hopefully will not be taken over by ChatGPT or any other AI, because I kind of like doing this. Of course, our goal on this podcast is to go beyond translation and localization and discuss creating a truly native experience for diverse audiences. Today, we are talking with Konstantin Savinkov, CEO and co-founder of Intento. Excited for this episode today. Let me tell you about Konstantin. After receiving a PhD in 2008, he led research and development efforts for online content services and then worked as a chief operating officer at Bookmate, Spotify for books, by the way. And in 2016, he contributed his experience as an artificial intelligence, AI, by the way, just in case, you're not entirely sure what artificial intelligence is. You know what I'm talking about. Technology and operations to found Intento, where they develop enterprise machine translation hub, helping large companies translate 20 times more on the same budget and make their customer and employee experiences instantly multilingual in 450 plus languages. I love it. That's incredible. So we're going to be talking to Konstantin, learning about what he has done, hearing some of his experiences, and also he's got some great perspectives. So let's rock it. Konstantin, welcome to the Native Experience. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Well, we got to know a little bit about yourself. I'm excited about our conversation, but tell us about yourself, what you do, and also what you do for fun.
So I'm, by training, I'm an AI person, got a PhD, it's been a while, and now I run a company called Intento, where we basically help large companies use AI. That was one of the, I think, important insights for me, is that although making core AI stuff is fun, it's not something which pushes the needle for large business. So that's why at Intento we focused on this more boring, but more important part.
Well, that's good. Tell us a little bit about where you're at in the world right now and any kind of fun things you're doing.
I'm in Berkeley, California, across the bay from the Silicon Valley. The summer is about to start. We still have rains. Fun stuff. It's a hard time of the year for fun stuff. It's mostly business and work.
Okay.
But where I can, I do some adventure trips. We have a very, diverse nature in California. You can find almost everything you want: mountains, rivers, ocean. So I'm enjoying this nature mostly with my kids, my family.
Oh, that's great. I love California. I got to tell you, my grandparents used to live in the Bay Area. San Francisco and East Bay and all that used to be just some of my favorite areas to come visit and stuff. And there's so much to see out there. But it's been years since I've been over there, but I just always loved it. So you're in a nice area.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So we've got our icebreaker questions here, and these are, for fun. They're quick answers, quick questions. So whatever comes to the top of your mind, here's question one. All right. If you could speak only one language for the rest of your life, which language would that be?
I would fail. I find such a big joy of learning new languages and then finding their differences, and then you get those phrases which stick to you from one language to another, and it's not really easy to go without them once you know them. I mean, probably if I have to, I'd like a little bit English, just for the sake of usefulness. I get a lot from other languages, which I learned in the past, so I would not give them up.
No, I love that answer because, it is kind of fun to try to get people to think of, okay, which language, if I had to pick one, but I'm also that type of person that would say there is no one answer. There's too many wonderful languages out there, too many wonderful options. And To me, that is a great answer. I appreciate that. All right. If you could live in any country in the world, where would you go?
Like another complex question. It feels like about, maybe 10 years ago where the world was on a peak of being united. It was impossible to imagine. And now, sadly, with all things going through the world, you can now start imagining, what if I had to live in one country, right? What if I had to speak one language? I don't know. I visited many countries. I think I liked two the most as, at least for short visits. I love Chile and Greenland for the unique combination of people and nature. But I wouldn't be able to live there, I guess. I moved to United States about 6 years ago. And for me, I realized at some point the country need to be aware enough to live in. It cannot be too boring. It cannot be too calm. So that's where I think US it's perfect for me for the time being.
That's a really good perspective. I like that. This next question, what is your favorite foreign language film or book? It's interesting because I was thinking about this and I thought, okay, so, I'm from the United States. And so for me, a foreign language film or book would not be from the United States. But if you're not from the United States, then technically a US foreign language film or book would count. So I'm going to throw that out to you. What's yours, or do you have one, or do you even have just something off the top of your mind that you absolutely love?
Yeah, I probably have one just by coincidence. So the book is called Ramdoodle.
Okay.
And it's an English book. It's like many people know Three Men in a Boat, right? From Jerome. Mm-hmm. And that's about the same, but it's about mountaineering. And since I spent probably a good 20 years of my life in high altitude mountaineering, I just love this book for the humor and the language and jokes and stuff like that.
Interesting. So mountaineering, tell me a little bit about your mountaineering experience.
Nothing like Mount Everest, but we used to travel with friends in different mountain regions of the world, typically on a relatively high altitude, around, 6,000-7,000 meters. We climbed some peaks, made some nice trips.
That's cool. That's great. All right. So I know you're in the business side of this time of year. You're working hard right now. So I always ask the question, what are you currently nerding out on? And, this can be a professional thing that you're really excited about and passionate about right now. So go ahead and talk about if there's something in the business side that you're just really focused on and excited about.
Yeah, I think I want to be too original here because everyone nerds out about GPT.
Yeah.
And since where I directly work in translation industry, that's totally what we do at the moment. This is quite ubiquitous technology. Our company, we help large companies to configure their automatic translation solutions using machine translation, things like that. Mm-hmm. But internally, we operate like any other software business, meaning that we develop software, we do marketing, we do sales, we support our customers. And that's why sort of for us, this GPT stuff is sort of twofold. Because on one hand, we're looking how to improve the solutions we're building with these new capabilities. But on another hand, we're looking how much more productive we can be as a business if we use it internally for all sorts of internal things, from writing emails to developing software code. Mm-hmm. And we see that it's totally game-changing everywhere. So that's why it's totally my favorite topic at the moment. That's where I spend my weekends. During business days, I have to run the company. I cannot really, play too much with fun technologies. But when I'm off, I can do it. That's what I do.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get into ChatGPT a little bit because I know it's huge. It feels like it's taking over. What do you think about ChatGPT, positive and negative?
The technology has been around a couple of years, and we got access to the first GPT-3 version. I think it was January 2021, which is more than 2 years ago. Until the update in late November last year, it was very subpar, especially in non-English languages. It was good, but for us humans, we may consider something good, but if we need to change the way we work, it should be much better. And GPT for 2 years, it was good, but not good enough for people to change the way they work. And now what happened in end of last year, they developed this new model, which was updated GPT-3, but like the latest version, DaVinci 3. And then they almost simultaneously released 3.5, which is ChatGPT. It was in January as this free web service. And then suddenly it was better. It was good enough for people to go to a new web page to copy and paste back their daily stuff. From AI perspective, it's quite important that all things in the past, they were like machine translation. It's trained on a very specific narrow task, which some people do, translators, but it's a very specific thing. But GPT is trained just to produce output based on input. And if you think that's what we humans do, probably 95% of our life when we are not sleeping. Yeah. We're getting something in the input. We're producing something on the output, just like two of us on this podcast, right? So that's I think what's unique about this thing is that it can be repurposed to do almost everything. I think what's bad, it's what everyone highlights, is that it's a new tech. People don't really know how to use it. They can start sharing wrong data with it. They can over rely on it. But it happens all the time. I mean, when machine translation was just introduced, I think one big oil company at some point found all their proprietary data on Google search, just because they didn't know that they cannot really paste their confidential information in this free online translator. Much like here, it will take some time.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, just noticing that sometimes GPT or even some of the other AIs they'll produce some really accurate, kind of almost, wow, that was scary level of accuracy kind of, results. And then at the other times you're going, yeah, not even close. So it is good to be able to learn how to use it and then be able to go through and, essentially kind of proof it just to make sure that it's been done correctly. It's what you're looking for. But, I see it as a nice tool to really assist us and take some of the load off to allow us to be able to focus on other things too. Ideally, anyway. What do you think it needs to improve first, before it really becomes more widely used or more effective?
In terms of the model power or capabilities, I think it's sort of enough, meaning that definitely if it becomes better or more accurate or anything like that, then it will be some next level. We'll take our productivity to 11 from 10, but even at 10, it's all right. I think where it needs to improve, it's quite boring stuff, which every new technology needs to master, is that it needs to be cheaper, it needs to be faster. It's compared to more traditional tools like machine translation, it's super slow at the moment. It takes about 3 to 10 seconds to process one sentence. We used to have sub-second speeds for AI, so everyone expects it to be faster. Any AI is partly about like hardcore technology, like neural networks. And then in part, it's about data and about having right data. Currently, it feels that their data is not very well balanced. So what it means that, for example, if you try to use it for translation, and if you're trying to translate something just outside of general domain, outside of what people typically write in the internet and masse, then you see how quality drops. The same was with machine translation when it's just emerged. It was good for general stuff, but it was not good for some specific topics. So I think should be lots of effort put into data engineering to make GPT provide as much as you can. You can get accurate answers for general topics in English and for some of the domain-specific things in English, but when it comes to other languages and when it comes to very special domains like specific fields of medicine or legal, then it starts to lose accuracy. And I think that's where lots of improvement is needed.
How do you think GPT is going to influence machine translation in general?
When we say machine translation, I think there's a bit of terminology conflict. On one hand, we typically mean automatic translation in general when we say machine translation, just like translation made by machines. But then there's another meaning, which is machine translations, like specifically machine translation AI, which is this narrow type of neural model. Machine translation as a technology is actually pretty good already. But for automatic translation, to have really good automatic translation, it lacks certain things. It lacks ability to do it lacks common sense. Put as inputs, it's not always really should be taken at face value. And then it lacks ability to work in context. For example, if you translate something from English to Spanish, then you have to take care about tone of voice, you have to care about gender, and that's context. And machine translation doesn't give you levers to add this context. That's where we see lots of use from GPT, is basically to extend machine translation capabilities to achieve really good automatic translation. That's where we use it already in production at Intento for certain customers, for certain use cases. We just presented probably a month ago at XTM Live how we use it to achieve gender translations at scale.
Yeah.
That's sort of short-term impact, but I think bigger impact will be probably in 3 to 5 years. I mean, it may sound very radical, but if you will, in many cases we translate just because we can't create in many languages. It's sort of tool to solve the problem, because ideally, of course, we would have copywriter for every language who perfectly understands business context and idea and target audience, and they will just write it from scratch for every target audience. But practically that's impossible. It's too expensive. It's not scalable. So what we do, we write content. We write what we call original content. And by original, we often actually mean English American. Which is totally not local enough for many, many other countries. And then we take this content and we translate it. And then translators have to figure it out. They transcreate, they have to change things. And I think the biggest impact from GPT will be that in many, many cases, now we'll have a way to move from these, let me call it pivotal content creation, where we pivot through American content to get to the rest of the world. And we'll be able to create content right in the language, right for the audience which we want to reach. Yeah. That's, I think, will be the biggest impact.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good to know. Now, are you seeing any other trends in neural machine translation, just to specify that, and then also translation technology as well? Are you seeing anything else coming?
I think there is one. It was actively discussed just before GPT was released. It was actively discussed in the autumn. Today, most of the machine translation models, they are built around language pairs, meaning that if you want to translate from English to Spanish, you have one model. If you want to translate from Spanish to French, you have another model. Even if it's sort of all those lots of models hidden under the hood, it's still separate models. That's why when you want to build really custom machine translation for you, typically, most of the systems like Google and Microsoft, you have to train it with one of the languages being English, because in the baseline, they have these bricks, and those bricks are models to or from English in some way, even if it's sort of inside neural network. People were discussing a lot on multilingual models, like truly multilingual models. For model, there is no difference what languages you're using. It's just for some languages it provides better quality, for others less of quality. But what's important is when you improve it for one language pair, it improves the model for other languages as well. That's, I think, for GPT, this sort of taken to extreme. It's a single model working across all the languages, but most of the machine translation models, except very, very few, they still use this older approach. And I think a very big trend will be merging these two technologies. It's not very easy. It's not only about AI and ability to build this big neural network. It's also about, these boring things which we put lots of attention to at Intento, for example, change management. Like on one hand, yes, if you translate your content to 20 languages, you want it so that every translation boosts this model for all other languages. That's sort of good side of things. But if you think, humans make errors and mistakes. Yeah. So not every translation is a good one. And then what happens if you update your model with new data and it's not very good data, so you actually break something? And what if you break not only one language, but you break all of them because of this update? And that's something which enterprise solutions cannot have. That's why in the, big solutions are built in a modular fashion so that you can change them gradually. And you can always control how your errors and bugs propagate through the system. And that's, I believe, why it will not be immediate. All the technology, AI technology is out there, but probably it will take a few years to put it into real production so that you can do all this change management and all these boring things. I'm biased here, so I...
No, but I appreciate your perspective, and that's because it's here whether we like it or not, and we're being faced with it. We're trying to figure out how to use it, and so no, this is really good information. Yeah, appreciate it. Speaking of translation, this is nuts. If you're tired of spending hours transcribing audio or video content, or maybe you want to create accessible content for a wider audience, but it's time consuming. That subtitling, that translation, it is time consuming. All right, listen up. I got an idea for you here, okay? Check out Scribe. It is an effortless solution for transcription, subtitling, and translation. With Scribe, you can translate speech to text in record time, create on-brand subtitles instantly, and translate and create subtitles across 171 languages in minutes. Wow, man. I'm just exhausted thinking about that. That's incredible. But you don't have to get exhausted. That's what's amazing. You can reach more audiences and create accessible content in any language for any platform, anywhere. Super simple. I love it. You can try Scribe out. So go do that. See how it can transform your media content creation process. Head on over to lexigo.com/scribe and see what you think. All right, let's get back into it. Switching gears, I'd like to know a little bit about your cultural background. What is it?
I grew up in Russia. I moved to US about 6 years ago.
Okay.
Berkeley Skydeck invited us into their accelerator. It's UC Berkeley Startup Accelerator. Yeah. It was a very radical move. We moved in about 2 weeks, basically immediately.
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah, you're not kidding. That's a big change, too. Are you enjoying your current location? Do you miss Russia? Are you ready to go back, or are you happy where you're at?
Oh, I mean, of course not, because it's a mess now in Russia with invasion to Ukraine. I do enjoy Berkeley. I visited lots of countries, and I also considered lots of countries for to move there. I found the US, or at least its Californian part, to be, as I mentioned, it's good enough and weird enough to live and feel alive.
Nice.
That's why for some other countries, they just a bit too calm and too boring, if you will, for me.
That's good.
I really like a very unique climate, which we have here, which is quite cool almost through all the year. At some point, it felt that this uniqueness of the Silicon Valley is fading out with pandemic, where everything moved to online.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it actually comes back. Restrictions are lifting. There's more and more value in offline activities in the Bay Area. And also it feels like with being harder to organize these live activities, they are more valuable. They became more valuable because there's less of them.
Yeah. You know what I like? You've said this a couple of times now. You keep saying good enough. And I really like that perspective because nothing's perfect. It never will be. Ideally things are great, but a lot of times things are good enough. And I think that that's a really good way of looking at it because, I mean, that's the way things are going to be sometimes. They're good enough, which means then they're good. and we got to go with it. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out, that I appreciated you using those words, because I think it's a really great perspective to keep in mind. And I like that you're happy where you're at. And I'm glad you're in. Yeah, California is definitely a place of interest. There's a lot to do there and a lot to see and a lot of variety there, which is really cool. Now, I know you speak a lot of languages. So which languages do you speak?
I was learning lots of languages. That's a better way to put it.
Oh, okay. That's okay.
I speak English, Russian, and Spanish a little bit.
Okay.
But I was also learning languages like Dari when we were planning a mountaineering trip to Afghanistan. I learned a little bit Inuit when we were traveling to Greenland, because back then, Inuit was one of the languages where you didn't have any machine translation at all. So you had to learn some basic phrases. Yeah. And a little bit of Chinese when we just started to work with some of them. It's always when you work with companies from China, you need to know a little bit of Chinese to understand what's going on. Yeah.
Definitely.
So but I forgot almost all of them except Spanish, maybe.
Well, and you mentioned earlier when I was asking, if you could only speak one language, what would you choose? And you were saying, that's a tough question. You'd want to speak the ones you've learned and continue to learn them. What's been your experience and even how has that shaped your perspective in the world and on life by learning these different languages?
Every language brings a different perspective. Much like when you learn other people, you understand that there may be a different angle than yours, and your word becomes richer. The same with other languages. For example, Dari, I think it's the only language I learned where it's like, in the middle of the sentence, order of the words are not very important. It's important how you start, how you end the sentence. And that's also helps to understand importance, because in other languages like English or Russian or Spanish, what you see are words in certain order.
Yeah.
And that sort of makes it a default. And then you realize that actually the order may be different. I didn't learn Chinese enough to speak in it, but I understood how words and phrases are built in Chinese. And it helped me to understand people from this region speaking English, because I started to understand how they construct sentences better, even in English.
Yeah.
And things like that.
Yeah, that's true. When you're learning languages and you're starting to interact with people too, from different cultures and countries, you start to understand. I mean, if you're paying attention, of course, you start to understand also how they see things, what their perspective is. So it's not just spoken language, but it's also the overall communication in general. It's really interesting to understand how that works too. And yeah, it's really fun. I love it. I think it's amazing. It really opens things up. If I'm being honest, learning languages and learning other cultures has helped me to become less selfish, if that makes sense.
That's totally true. Because they create new angle. They enable this outside look yourself as well.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I always talk about Taiwan on the show and Chinese in general, because Taiwan was really the first country that I visited that was outside of like Canada, which yes, Canadians and Americans have obviously quite a few differences, but it's still similar compared to going to Asian country of some kind. It's very different. And so going to Taiwan, it was my first real experience doing that. Obviously, I have a lot of memories doing that. In America, everybody's gotten so sensitive and so offended. And, just recently, of course, there's obviously good reason for it. And then also we need to kind of take care on how sensitive we are. But it's amazing when you start listening to people from other countries, they're not as much, for example, or they don't take themselves as seriously, or they joke with each other, they laugh with each other. It's just interesting, just again, going to some of the differences, and you just start to see that and you just start to go, we need, wherever you may be right now, in our country, in my country, we need a better perspective, and we can learn that from other cultures. And that's something that I just appreciate. Yeah,
that's
so much.
true. That's something which I vividly remember. I remember seeing Americans as very sensitive, like to the extreme, and not understanding, looking at this from this type of typical stereotype angle. when I applied to green card, I lived for probably 3 years without much leaving US. And then my first trip, I understood that I became a person like that I'm too sensitive now.
Yeah.
And I started to have these knee-jerk reactions on things which I didn't have before. And I realized that none of these two extremes is valid. But what you need to do, you need to understand both perspectives and navigate them. To be empathic, you need to understand the culture of a person. Yeah. Sort of circling back to business, after pandemic started, we became truly global. So we ditched offices. Now we have people in probably 16 countries. And it's almost impossible to be empathic if you do not understand the culture background of a person. So that's so super important.
Yeah, no, you're right. If you're not listening and if you're not paying attention and you're not asking questions, then you don't know. And another thing that I think is interesting, when you really start to think about what I'm about to say here, it kind of puts you in an interesting spot. But for example, if you were not physically present in that situation, then technically you don't know. It's all based on someone else's either eyewitness account, or maybe it's based on theory, maybe it's based on opinion, but we don't know because we were not there in that moment and we didn't witness it firsthand. And so that's another thing that I kind of started to step back and say, when somebody shares something, it's easy for us to form an opinion about it. And yes, we can listen to their opinion and we can start to determine what it is they're saying, understand their culture, that kind of thing too. But unless we were actually there, we still really don't know. And so it's just a nice thing to keep in the back of your mind to not be quick to judge, if that all makes sense too, in addition to the listening aspect.
Yes, especially with GPT and Midjourney and with all these tools to create the message, which may not be rooted in something, in real world. I think that's something where we humans will need to improve a lot in understanding that now, the very existence of a message or an opinion doesn't really make it valid. Because it's not even some person can be some illicit message from some evil person, but there may be even no such a person. It may be just hallucination of an AI. I think humanity is really in the interesting point in time because we just sort of detached from the reality with all things remote first after pandemic. And now we see that our digital reality can be bent in any way with this new type of AI. So I think we humans will be looking for how we go further. Yeah. I really like this article by Harari. It says that the existential threat to humanity because the language and the stories, it's how we humans exist.
Yeah, that's true. There's a museum in Arizona that I did not know about, and it's all about music. And I'm a musician, so I was so excited to go. But they have an entire floor dedicated to music from different cultures and different countries. I mean, you look at language, you look at stories, and you even look at music from these different cultures, and it communicates, like you said, who they are, why they do what they do, how it identifies them and stuff like that too. And you're right. I mean, it's so important to communicate that. We don't want to lose that.
I feel it's still very important that when we see some of this culture heritage, we understand that it comes from real people. It's not invented 5 minutes ago.
Definitely. And that's what I'm excited about is that I do love new tech. I'm always up for new technology. It's so exciting. It's so interesting. I'm always like, okay, how can I early adopt this technology? But it needs to benefit. It needs to help us and assist us so that we can, but not take over or not take away the identity, that we're trying to communicate. Because like you said, it's humans, it's real humans. And that's the most important thing that can't be replaced. So of course, this podcast is all about getting truly native and giving truly native experiences. And you shared a lot already on how you do that and what you're doing. But I'm curious if you have any final advice for us on how you truly get native and deliver a truly native experience, and then also how we should be doing the same thing.
By the end of the day, it's putting user experience, making the most important. What I mean by that is, if you look at the translation industry, for example, people used to define quality by linguists, by linguist opinion. While for end users, it's very different. And we've seen many, many cases when users disagree with the linguist.
Yeah.
And when going after linguist opinion just takes too much time or it's too expensive to deliver the value to the users. So that's why it's in its core is going with the user, getting feedback from the users, taking user satisfaction and user opinion as the most important metric of quality and collecting feedback. We had lots of cases where there was some obscure problem and was not clear what's wrong, but then you got end user feedback. And then you finally realize what was the issue with this translation. And then you kind of fix it at scale for all the users.
Yeah.
So I would say it's just being user-centric and prioritizing users over some rules which you may have in the industry.
I love it. Well, Konstantin, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everything you shared and all of this great. I loved your perspectives. I love the advice and I love your experiences too. And I know we can all learn from this. So thank you for taking the time. Appreciate this.
Thank you, Brian. I loved chatting.
Konstantin Savinkov, CEO and co-founder of Intento. Konstantin, thank you so much. It was great. I loved it. I loved your perspective and all that wonderful advice. So I hope you learned something today. Thank you, by the way, for joining us today and listening. Love to hear what you thought. Love to hear what you're thinking of the show so far. I'd love to hear what you learned from this episode. If you have any thoughts of things you want us to cover on this podcast, let us know. It's super easy. All you got to do is, email us. I know it's kind of like, hey, email. Seriously, email us, please. nx@lexigo.com. Again, very simple. nx@lexigo.com. Hope you're enjoying the show. We have so much coming. We're excited to bring all of this to you. I mean, honestly, this has been a lot of fun to do already, but so much coming. So do stay tuned. Do make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We're doing this on a weekly basis. But hey, thank you again for joining us. We will talk to you soon. And remember, this is so important. Always strive for authenticity and embrace the power of native experiences. Have an amazing week. We'll see you in the next episode.